Virginia Ruggiero, Stockbridge Avenue. If you all know in the past, you were crazy at Stockbridge Avenue with speeding, and there's crazy people driving up and down. They don't obey the signs or anything else. We had occasion this week to go out and get the paper about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we saw 2 cars coming up Stockbridge. We thought, oh, one guy is towing another guy. But no, the second man was tailgating the first guy. And when the first guy didn't speed up, which he shouldn't have, the other one went around over the double line and on his way. And this is the kind of thing that goes on every day, all day long. And we propose, I've talked to the neighbors, and they agree, a medium-sized roundabout at Nora and Stockbridge. And that would be directly in front of our house. So we'd probably be the ones most impacted by it. But it would be worth everything if we could slow people down coming up Stockbridge and going east on Stockbridge. It's just a racetrack. And I wanted to read you a little note that I cut out of the 3A magazine, you know, the Bible for the motorists. It said, myth, roundabouts are dangerous. That's a myth. Reality, roundabouts have less than 1/3 as many crash spots at the intersections and can reduce fatalities by as much as 90%. So I think it's an idea worth looking into. Like I say, if they put a roundabout in and it's planted, I'll be glad to take care of it. And I think we should try that, maybe not just on Stockbridge, but on all the streets. It would be something to slow traffic down. They could go around it, the firemen and the other things can go around it, so it would be very, very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Are there any other public comments?
I'm also 29 Stockbridge, Jean Schaff. I'm also a resident of Stockbridge. And yesterday I had the great favor of putting out my garbage cans. And I want to tell you that the traffic whizzing by was enough, so I held on so I wouldn't have to, gravitate to the ground when they passed. They were really speeding. And I think it's a very good idea to slow it down because, you see, we are arterial that goes right to Alameda. So you go up and down Stockbridge and you can zoom on down, even though there are 2 or 3 stop signs in between. So I really felt yesterday that I was at jeopardy with my garbage cans, which is a altogether different subject. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, seeing nobody else, we will now go to the presentations. First agenda item here is the discussion and possible action to consider results of the Holbrook Lane and 17th Avenue resident survey.
We have a presentation.
Oh, did you get?
I asked for a presentation.
It's on
It's listed. Mr. Lauder is here for the presentation.
the paper. There's a revised agenda that I left on front of your station there.
Okay, let's have the presentation.
Thank you. I didn't stand up before because I was on the agenda and we were both revised agenda. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I also heard you talk about roundabouts, although highway roundabout in particular for different purposes, common, but for traffic speeding up. Firstly, I'm a local resident with a 35-year fascination in traffic patterns, but I'm not an expert. I have no formal training in the field, but I've studied this issue a great deal. international travel has shown what's possible with roundabouts elsewhere. They do tremendous things in other countries, and they're only starting to be adopted here. And our Department of Transportation, both state and federal, are very enthusiastic about them. And I have, for the members of the committee, a one-page brochure put out by the Federal Highways Administration on them, which goes into a great many good benefits. I'll leave those for you. While I may not be the expert on roundabouts, I think I'm sufficiently expert to think that it's a good solution here, and I'll explain. So the objective here is to try to avoid time wastage. So time is money, and so it's congestion is a hidden tax. It's better for the environment, results in better fuel efficiency, which lack of fuel efficiency is yet another tax on drivers, and of course, better fuel efficiency has geopolitical implications, and it's safer. As the earlier commenter mentioned, roundabouts are a great deal safer. I'll get into that in a little more detail. One of my motivations is to try to create a model that would be imitated elsewhere. Roundabouts started to be put in some states in certain places, and then after those succeeded, they tended to grow more and more in that state. However, in California, there are very few. So the problem is rush hour congestion. I'm specifically referring to the intersection of Alameda and Atherton Avenue. So I measured 5:30 p.m., 4.5-minute time to get through that intersection northbound. Traffic was back at Lago, which is about 1,800 feet. Compared to the speed limit, that's a delay of 3.8 minutes per car. So that means there were about 56 cars in the jam, and I measured 12.5 cars per minute, which is 750 cars per hour. And so calculating the cost of that lost time, it's 3.8 minutes per car times 750 cars per hour. That's 48 car hours per hour of jam in that direction. Times 1.2 occupants per car, that's 57 person hours per hour of jam in that direction. And then the average wage rate in the United States is $20 per hour, so that's $1,445 per hour of opportunity cost. And if you multiply that by 260 days per year, assuming that the jam only lasts an hour, then that's $297,000 per year per direction of lost time. The cost of gas is similar. If 3,000 cars per day each way, it takes about 2 ounces of gas to accelerate, averages about 5 cents per times 3,000 cars per day. That's $51,000 per year, and that's the gasoline costs. There are other costs as well. So in regard to safety, there was a study done by the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety that studied 24 intersections that were converted to roundabouts from either traffic lights or stop signs. And they found crashes dropped 40%, injury crashes dropped 76%, and fatal crashes dropped 90%. I do not pretend that this intersection is a major hazard. I don't think it is, but roundabouts in general have this benefit. So the key benefit that I'm expecting is capacity, meaning the opportunity to alleviate the congestion and the delay. So for a single lane roundabout, the capacity per hour is approximately 1,200 in each direction, minus the cars that turn left in the opposite direction. There's very little turning onto Atherton Avenue. Most of the traffic remains in Alameda, so one could expect the traffic to be flow improvement of more than 50%, and that would eliminate the congestion. It raises the question of whether we would shift the jam elsewhere. The answer in other studies is it shifts it somewhat, and not nowhere near 100%, and it's not zero either. It really is situational. It depends on the traffic elsewhere, or the road layout and where people's destinations are. So, but you have to start somewhere, and because arguably any attempt to relieve congestion anywhere will tend to shift it somewhere else, but not 100%. So the cost depends on the type of roundabout. There's mini roundabouts, which can be as little as $50,000. There's a standard one costs about $100,000, but it's very approximate. It depends on the number of factors. And this might require some adjacent land at the corner, but that land does not appear to be critical to the property owners. I mean, the house is not close to that corner. And there are numerous federal, state, and county funding sources. Got into that yet. So my recommendation is that there be a traffic study to quantify the extent of the problem, retain an expert on roundabouts to opine, and if it looks promising, to look at potential funding sources. That's it. Thank you. If there are any questions, happy to try to answer.
I'm interested in your interest in this and why you're proposing it. Do you live nearby, or do you drive through it every day, or what?
I do. I live off of Atherton Avenue, but honestly, this doesn't affect me a whole lot since I work out of my home. My main interest in this is I feel, I have done what I can to improve my own home efficiency, driving efficient cars, solar panels on the roof. But when I see vast amounts of fuel wasted and time wasted in this country because of how we lay out our roads, compared to in Europe, where average fuel efficiency is double that of the U.S., partly because of roundabouts. I see this as a tremendous shame and something that should be fixed. Our government and the Department of Transportation, they are advocating that people make these changes, but ultimately these changes don't get made unless someone stands up and says, "Hey, we ought to put one in here." And so I think that this is an ideal place to put it. There are other potential places to put it, but I can't say that any of these affect me directly because, due to the fact that I tend not to have a normal commute pattern.
Any questions from other members of the public?
Well, thank you for your
I would just comment that, roundabouts are used, especially in Britain, all over the place. And I think they're very, very effective. And, they don't slow traffic as much as traffic lights or stop signs. And you've pointed out, I think they probably save gas because stopping and starting certainly. So I'm all in favor of roundabouts. And now it's a question for Duncan to see if we can find somebody to give him $100,000.
Yeah.
Right. Because $800,000 is going to be the cost of the study. Right.
Yeah. Well, I should also mention one other thing. Historically, before roundabouts are ever put in any community, there's a lot of fear that this has happened in America over and over again because many people remember what it's like to drive in Massachusetts and Washington with their traffic circles or rotaries. Traffic circles and rotaries are not modern roundabouts. They are very different, and there's chapter and verse, but the simple answer is that the road is shorter diameter, and the incoming traffic has priority over the traffic in the circle. So there's no more collisions, and there's priority of and so these days they're being replaced all over the place by roundabouts. And so the safety statistics here pertain to roundabouts and not traffic circles.
On the roundabout in Europe, the person on the roundabout has priority.
So you can't enter the circle unless it's free. The old-fashioned way of the traffic circle, beyond a certain traffic level, they will lock off, and so they're not a very functional thing, and they're being replaced all over the place. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.